Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us an extremely special guest, Lauren Southern, who's been on the show. Lauren, you were the it girl for a long time from the New Right. One day you said, screw this, I'm out of here. And unlike every other person who claims that they're out of here, you actually did vanish from social media. You went and now you start a family. Now you've kind of made a reappearance in public and you're living in Australia.
Yeah, no longer the it girl. Now I'm just the irrelevant girl.
Is it true that you moved to Australia because that's the birthplace of Hitler?
Is that, wait.
That's what I heard on the internet.
That's probably what my Wikipedia page says. Honestly, I haven't checked it, but every day there's a new update with some new interesting facts about me that I never knew. So I'll go check that.
My Wikipedia tells me that I'm an only child, which is a great surprise to my sister and my two adorable nephews. Now, you're a mom now.
Oh, that's fantastic. I am.
How old's your kid?
He's a little over one. Little menace.
How does becoming a mom like change your perspective? Because I got to tell you, being an uncle and seeing these two little idiots walking around and knowing how bad things are in the world, it really puts pressure on me to keep them as naive and stupid as long as possible. And I think about that every single day. And these aren't my kids. These are my nephews. So as someone who's seen humanity at its worst, both in your work, your documentary work, but also being the target of it, I'm sure that kind of impacts your thinking.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I was in high school, the iPhone was out, people had Snapchat, people had all of these things. And I was walking around with one of those Telus phones that you pulled the antenna out of. Thanks, mom and dad. Relentlessly bullied for it. Horrific. But I'm actually now, I look back at it and I'm like, thank God. Like, can you imagine politicians 20 years from now, all the Snapchat stories, all the Facebook data, all the crazy stuff they're going to have? I can't even imagine the things I would have Snapchatted or posted on Instagram in high school. Would not have been good. So I'm very thankful for that. Maybe I'll just let my poor son have a brick phone and he'll thank me for it later.
This actually already happened. There was a Senate candidate from Delaware, Christine O'Donnell, and Gawker leaked her nudes. And they were basically making the claim that like, oh, because she's running on a pro-life ticket, it's okay to like publicly post like this like softcore pornography that she sent to an ex. And that was one of those moments where you realize that you can't put anything past these people. They hold nothing sacred other than what is a means to an end to further their power and control.
Exactly. And you know what? The millennial generation was in this very awkward period. You look at Justin Trudeau with his serial blackfacing, right? And the millennial period was in this very awkward transition between kind of the early 2000s. We don't really care about race. We'll just make jokes all the time. You look at YouTube stars like Shane Dawson, and his whole past is just all these racist jokes. He's been canceled for it now. And the progressive woke stuff. Like when I was in grade 12, they introduced social justice class for the first time in my school. Oh, wow. So it's like teetering on that. And I think of all of these people that would have been in high school when I was in high school, and they absolutely would have done completely non-politically correct things that may or may not be on record because this was the boom of the internet as well. All I can say is it's going to be a very fun political season in 10 years.
Yeah. If we last that long.
Yeah, so exactly.
What made you just decide you were doing very well? You had a big platform. You were getting canceled certain places, but you had a very big audience. What made you decide, screw this, I'm out of here?
You know what? There were a lot of factors. Not all I put public, but there were a lot of factors. One of the big ones was I absolutely did want a family, and I had obviously a lot of my friends, almost all of them, because I'm traveling the world, going all over, filming protests. So most of my friends were YouTubers, commentators, people that, or even photographers that worked for outlets that I just run into at all of these protests or political events that had nothing to do with the YouTube world. But it was this kind of weird, group of people that just had no home really. And a lot of them would talk about, I want a family one day. This is the life I want to live. And it really is. I don't blame people online for mocking us at the time, because they're like, come on, you guys just travel around the world. You're not settled down with a community, getting married or any of this. Like, I don't blame people at all. And it is a whole lot of words. And I realized that unless I actually kind of made the decision, like a cutoff point, I need to either stay with this. I can't have a foot in both worlds. I'm just trying to find out how to do that now. But I needed to learn how to live without the internet, without the following. And it was really, I look back on it, and that year that I was completely offline, such a good mental health experience, such a good ego death, really, in more ways than one, giving up all of my kind of following, job, and more so on top of that, because people tried to destroy my reputation when I left with all these lies. So it was like I had a complete ego death and rebuilt who I was with community members on the ground, family members, people I grew up with, my professor. I went back to university, church. It was really needed, because your perspective can get very skewed when you're just in this YouTube world where you're doing a one-way conversation with an audience, and your peers are people who travel every day and know nothing of community. And I know what that feels like. It's addicting. It's intoxicating. I don't blame people for doing it. And it's even more addicting and intoxicating when you can tell yourself, and quite genuinely, I'm doing it for a good cause, so I can't stop. But at some point, if you have no home base, I mean, you're just, a plastic bag in the wind. There's nothing actually holding you down or tying you down. It's like people who don't have kids or any investment in the future of a country, or family or community, nothing that tells them why. I don't know. I think there's these grounding things you need in your life.
Last time we talked, you were telling the story of when you were arrested. How long were they holding in detention for?
Which time?
Oh, wasn't there like 28 hours where you weren't allowed to talk to anybody?
Oh, that was the UK time. Where was it? Calais.
Yeah.
I was arrested in Calais and held and detained. I think it was like 8 hours that I was actually in the kind of cell thing. And then there was questioning period before and after that for hours and hours. My favorite part about that particular incident, and you never know how these things work, like what happens when you get rejected or denied from entering a country.
Yeah.
And you think about that. I didn't realize this random French dude was literally just going to walk me to the border gate, open the door, say au revoir, and lock it. And it's like, I'm literally with a suitcase in the middle of nowhere, just standing on the other side of this border. Like, really? You're not even going to call me an Uber? My phone is dead. So I walked for like an hour. There was a shop area, but it was all completely closed. So I walked for ages until I found a McDonald's. Praise be McDonald's and capitalism for saving my life, but charged my phone and eventually got an Uber to, I had nowhere to stay. Middle of nowhere. Was fun. But that's the first time. The second one was actually way scarier. And that was when I was arrested in Turkey, which I was on your show in 2018. So that was after.
Is that something that's something you obviously don't miss? A lot of things you also had, like you had a lot of hate toward you. A lot of this was very much whipped up against you by, social media and so on and so forth. Were there any moments where you were like at a level of notoriety that you were scared, like people are going to stop you on the street and get in your face?
I'd had it happen before, not very often, but maybe twice, where people had actually gotten in my face, and it wasn't that scary. And that's one comforting thought, is the internet is so much talk, so much talk, very few actions. I've had the people that I'd be more scared of actually aren't the radical lefties. It's this weird group, and every person who does internet content knows it. Not necessarily a fan, you're not really sure what they are, but they're just this obsessed with you stalker type. And I had about 5 of them. They'd go between hate and love, and it was just like this crazy schizophrenia. One of them actually tried flying to Canada and were rejected by the border police for having multiple stalking charges and all of this, which was terrifying, obviously. Wow. So that was something that in the background I'd have to deal with. I had one person that made, I can genuinely say, over 100 Instagram accounts to try to follow me and harass my family. And I just keep blocking. And then within 2 minutes, they'd made another one. I'm like, do you have a job? Yeah. Do you have something that you do other than stalk me? But that's, that's just one of the fallbacks of being an internet figure. I don't doubt it happens to most people who get a bit of a following.
I'm sure you're following what's going on in the States with Trump losing his Twitter account, and they're cracking down on Gab, they're cracking down on Minds, and other such sites. Are you surprised by what's happening now? No. I made a video 3 years ago called the imminent digital exile, speaking about exactly this. What I will say is I'm surprised how quickly it has ramped up and happened. I kind of figured I'd have to wait a little longer to be vindicated on this one. But the whole video was talking about kind of this Black Mirror scenario where, we get to the point where you're literally getting locked out of your fridge, your Apple fridge or Samsung fridge, because it's like you made a racist comment with your friend while watching a movie last night. And then you're not allowed to get money from your bank account. You're not allowed to take the bus, like a social credit system type horrifying future, except the social credit is not making funny jokes. And I look at that and I'm like, actually, there are people not allowed to access money from their bank account at this very moment because of their politics. There are people not allowed to use MasterCard because of their politics. I'm not allowed to use a few payment processors. And obviously I've been banned from Patreon and a few other things. And I know I'm on thin ice. What really sucks is I have to think about that every time I do something. I actually filmed a video about the Capitol riots right after they happened. And I was about to hit post. And then I was like, is this just going to get my entire YouTube channel removed? And then I'm not going to be able to promote my documentaries at all. I'm not going to be able to have any sort of connection with all these people I've built up a trust and relationship over the years. Maybe I'll just wait for it to cool down a bit and then post it. And that sucks that I have to think like that, because you still have to, like, if you just completely lose, some people, they're like, I'll leave Facebook, I'll leave Twitter, I'll just leave it all and go to other social media sites. But I'm like, no. Wait until you're banned, because you still have the ability to reach out to people that wouldn't necessarily hear you before. And you need to take advantage of that. You shouldn't just give up and surrender the culture and popular platforms to the radical left just because, they're going to ban me one day anyways. No. Do what you can until they do. Fight to the bitter end. Yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for them if they just don't have to do anything and everyone just self-segregates. And it's like, now we have control of the entire conversation here. Yeah. The other thing that I think you'd agree with is, in terms of self-censoring, it would be a lot easier if there was even the remote possibility these rules are somehow coherent or objective. But it's always after the fact. There's no pretense that it's something that could make sense. It's like flipping a coin. And if it was like, okay, these 2 minutes of this video, violate terms of service, then you could easily should have the option, okay, delete those 2 minutes, leave my video. But of course, that's not a possibility. Right, exactly. It's they leave it all very obscure so they can ban you for anything. And with my ban from Patreon, they just invented something after the fact. So when you have all these people online say, well, just follow the terms of service and you won't get banned. It's like they will change the terms of service to make sure you get banned. It's like a communist court system. They will find something you did wrong. They made it for me, for Patreon, they called it manifest observable behavior. Coincidentally, MOB was the was the acronym. That sounds like something out of Scientology, right? Yeah, like someone's like exhibiting manifest observable behavior. It just sounds so ominous. So they sent me an email and they said, your manifest observable behavior could lead to loss of life, and we don't want to promote an activity that could lead to loss of life. I remember showing a lawyer this, and he's like,
Skydiving could lead to loss of life. Driving your car could lead to loss of life. They're going to have to ban every creator on this platform that does extreme sports. This makes no sense, even in a legal terminology. But I do know that they were getting outside pressure from lobbyist groups like Hope Not Hate, who were telling them you have to ban Lauren Southern, you have to get her off your site. And I think they just, they folded to that and didn't want to say it publicly because no site wants to admit they're making their policy decisions based off pressure from lobbyist groups and not their actual policy on free speech. Because what kind of creator is going to trust your site and go join it if, any lobbyist organization could pressure them to kick you off and there's no real guarantee, and that's your income. The moment that happened, I was like, I'm in Italy filming something right now, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford flights home because my whole income has just been taken away from me. It's a pretty, shocking experience, but you roll with the punches in this kind of world for sure. Everyone who works in politics knows that.
Hey guys, want to take a quick second and thank our newest sponsor, Fume. If you go to fumeessential.com, FUMESSENTIAL.com, and use promo code Malice10, you get 10% off your order. What is it? Fume is a natural, non-addictive replacement for smoking, vaping, and nicotine addictions. It's not a vape. It's not a cigarette. It's a hollow piece of Canadian maple with cores that are infused with the benefits of the world's super plants. This is a great replacement therapy because one of the things people who smoke or vape have an issue with is that thing of what do you do with your hands, right? Like you always had that ritual. This replaces that ritualized behavior and can help you transition to getting rid of nicotine addiction. There's a wide selection of cores. They focus on flavor, aroma, and the specific effect you're looking for. Lavender to relax, peppermint to have good breath, and they're made in Canada with Canadian maple. Thank you, Lauren. You're probably related to these people. If you go to FUMessential.com, look at their entire selection. There's more than half a dozen flavors. They explain the program. And if you use promo code Malice10, you get 10% off your entire order. Let's get back to the Canadian. What made you decide to return to the internet after all this time?
There were a few things. One, okay, so here's, I did this stupid me. If I could go back in time and smack myself in the face and say, you stupid bitch, I would. But I did a very long documentary with The Atlantic.
Right, yeah. With Cernovich, my buddy was in there too.
Yeah. And they swore on their life when they started it. I told them no for a year. I'm like, I'm not doing this documentary. I don't trust you. I don't trust the mainstream media. They sat down with me and I'd met them a few times because they were following around Cernovich and a few other figures. And I was just like, hello in passing. But they were like, we promise you, we want to actually understand conservatism. We want to understand the Trump wave. We think all these other sites like Vice and BuzzFeed, they just make caricatures and no one's interested in that. No one's interested in another hit piece. We want to actually understand why people supported Trump and show the normal side of that.
Let me answer you quickly. Do you think in retrospect they were lying or they were delusional?
I actually think there could be three things.
Okay.
I think that there was a chance that they did want to make a genuine documentary investigating and humanizing people, but The Atlantic took a look at it and were like, absolutely not. You will make this a hit piece. So I think there was a chance for that.
Yeah.
But the level of betrayal that happened behind the scenes, like the promises made, secret recordings, all of this was just to the degree that I can no longer look at the individual who did this, Daniel Lombroso, as someone who he has to be a sociopath for the level of things that he did to me. But so this article came out, this movie came out. I didn't even recognize the person they wrote about. Once again, you mentioned your Wikipedia page. You're like, my Wikipedia page says I have no siblings. The opening paragraph of this article Daniel wrote on me, which he spent 4 years with me.
So it's not some like he had one interview, maybe you were having a bad day, he's going to get the wrong impression. So he spent time with you.
And he
personal level
twisted this story. He twisted it. He wrote that I grew up in one of the wealthiest suburbs in Vancouver. I read that because, of course, so the narrative was like Lauren may have had poor immigrant grandparents, but her parents pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and now they're super wealthy and living in the wealthiest suburb in Vancouver. I grew up in Surrey, BC. Anyone who knows it, like I literally get mocked on Twitter for it because Surrey girls are known to be like kind of crackheads that walk around the street in sweatpants and a bra. We had to take the radio out of our car when we went to bed for the night because otherwise someone would smash our window and steal it. My first crib was a box. And then I think I upgraded to the bathtub. Yes, my parents worked their ass off and I had a great childhood. But the notion that I was in the wealthiest suburb in Vancouver just completely false. And of course, but that had to be the narrative because I have to be this privileged white individual that's right-wing conservative. And I keep reading this and I don't think they could reconcile the narrative that they were writing because they were writing that I was like white nationalist, Nazi, all of this. That's the narrative they planned on going with the documentary. They would have had thousands of hours of footage of me saying, no, I'm not a white nationalist, neo-Nazi, all of these things. I just have genuine concerns about the loss of culture, the loss of Western culture. No, I don't think it's okay to replace entire groups in Europe as it wouldn't be okay to destroy native cultures in Canada. Like these are legitimate questions. Cut every single bit of that out, wrote that I was a white nationalist, even when, so my husband is half Asian, right? And this was obviously not something I wanted to, I didn't want to drag my family into the world. Despite this, the writer drags that into the world and he finds the most insidious way to include it. I remember the fact checker calling me for this article and they're like, we just wanted to fact check that you said to Daniel, no partner and marriage can be perfect. And that's how I reconcile being in a mixed race relationship and that it's not the perfect situation. And I don't like that fact about him, but nothing's perfect. And I was
wait, hold on. Let's pause this for a second. Because that moment when this is someone who you're giving the benefit of the doubt, and to get that fact checker call, the fact checker's innocent, right? They're just doing their job. So they're not making this up. They're reading from something that had been written about you. And to hear what went through your head, I would be thinking, what's my husband going to think? How bad is this article going to be? This is not something someone could be confused about. Let me give you another example that this reminds me of. Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks was being interviewed by the New York Times. And they had quoted him because he had David Duke on his show. Mm-hmm. And David Duke was insisting that he's not anti-Semitic. And Cenk, I think that's how you pronounce his name, goes, no, of course you're not, David. And they quoted him verbatim, saying when David Duke was on his show, he said, no, of course you're not, David. It's not possible to watch that clip and to think he's not being sarcastic. It's literally impossible. It's not like they're going to transcript. So it's not possible when he was interviewing you that he thought you were referencing your husband's racial background as one of the issues in your relationship.
That wasn't even the topic. Okay. So I asked the fact checker, I was like, where did you get that quote? Like, I would never have said anything of the sort. And the fact checker is like, oh, Daniel put a link here to the sound bite or the sound clip, because obviously they had been recording for 4 years. Sure. So she's like, I have a link. I'll double check the link. She opens it and she's like, I am so sorry. I don't know why he put this in here. You're not even talking about your marriage or relationships or anything. I was talking about conservatism and community and the pursuit of like conservative ideals and how conservative ideals can't always be perfect. And he just took that quote and put it in to the completely different context, completely just to make me look like this absolute monster. So she's like, okay, I took out the quote. They still put it in. But in a different, they twisted it a little. So it's just like, and when Lauren was asked about her husband and marriage and community, what did she say? And I quote, not every situation can be perfect. So I have all of these people on Reddit saying, isn't this disgusting of Lauren to say about her family?
It would be disgusting.
Yeah, it would be absolutely horrible if I actually said that. So I look at this and I'm like, you are not even a human being, Daniel. Like, that is sociopath stuff. That is like how do you do that to someone you've pretended to be friends with for 4 years? I don't know. But there were other aspects in that he put like just throwaway lines like, Lauren decided to clean her image and stop posting white nationalist things on her Instagram. I post outfits and pictures of my hedgehogs on Instagram. How can you just write that? So anyways, I saw this article and I saw the movie that came out. And
wait, I got to ask you, when you got the article, did you follow up with him, or you were like, this is a lost cause with this guy?
So I spoke to The Atlantic. I called them. I sent them a bunch of emails saying, like, here's all the things that are absolutely inaccurate. One thing they did end up changing in the article, although, of course, like mainstream media do, they made it this really shady. They didn't notify anyone that they changed it. They just 5 days later, after the article had already gone viral, they edited it. So Daniel said, Lauren made tons of money, and with her subscribers' money, she would spend it going to fancy chateaus in France to vacation. And like the most fancy, expensive chateaus, she'd just waste her subscribers' money on. So what actually happened in that incident was I told Daniel he could come with me to filming with Borderless in France. We were going to go speak to migrants who had moved there and were living under bridges. And the hotels in Paris were insane. Like, 1,000 euros every other night because it was peak vacation time. Yeah. They had actually filled up all of the hotels with migrants that were around these areas.
Oh, wow.
So they were just absolutely packed because it was cold. It was getting to winter. So it was like crazy expensive. And I'm like, I can't justify spending my subscribers and donors' money on these ridiculously expensive hotels in Paris. And we were looking for solutions. I had messaged them saying, no, we don't have a place yet because we're still trying to find. And of course, The Atlantic are trying to make plans. So Daniel messages me and he's like, The Atlantic have booked a chateau outside the city. It's going to be an hour drive for you to get into film. And it's only like €100 a night, which is a phenomenal price compared to everything else. So if you're willing to do that hour drive, I will speak to the woman who works here and set it up for you guys. And I'm like, thank you so much. So we drove out to the chateau, stayed there. And then he invented the narrative that I wasted my subscribers' money going to a fancy Paris countryside chateau, spent crazy amounts of money to just go on a little vacation for myself. When he set that up, it was the cheapest option. And I was like, I have all the texts for this. I have all the messages. And The Atlantic actually seemed horrified on the phone. They're like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he did that. Plus, like, our journalists aren't actually allowed to even set up stay for the subjects they're covering. So we'll shift that. They just did a little stealth edit. And I still get people, once again, on Twitter. They're like, you waste all your subscribers' money on fancy chateaus and pretend you're filming documentaries. It's amazing how they can get away with this.
But have you talked to him since this came out?
I think I just sent him one message calling him slimy or something along those lines. Getting pretty frustrated. I was pretty heartbroken over the whole situation.
Well, I think when you even are acquaintances with someone for 4 years, there's like a certain like bell curve in terms of, okay, maybe they're going to get it wrong. Maybe they're going to, misconstrue things. Maybe, when I say something, they're going to have the Southern Poverty Law Center person give a counterpoint. Like, you think this is as bad as you would not think it's going to be literally completely devoid from what you discussed, especially because I'm sure you made pains to clarify your perspective repeatedly to the point where you knew he must have understood it.
Repeatedly. There are so many instances that are really, really awful. One, so there's two things. I'll get to it. This is part of the reason I came back, because I didn't want them to write my narrative and write who I was for my son to read one day, because it's wrong and it's not who I am. And so even more so there was one incident where I was secretly recorded. A phone call happened where another public figure called me and they were flirting with me and basically, just laying the moves on. And I was like, nope, I'm not interested. This, that, the other. The Atlantic began calling me after that. And they're like, and I complained to Daniel after this. Of course, he had been pretending to be my friend for ages. I'm like, we're not on camera, right? Oh, yeah, so irritating. Like, I don't really want this attention, da, 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 da. And he always played the role of the feminist supporter. He's like, oh, Lauren, you don't deserve any sort of sexism. You don't deserve that. I'm here for you. Nothing will go in the documentary. Just talk to me as your confidant, right? I get a call from the Atlantic like 6-7 months later, and they're like, we secretly recorded you. We have this recording of this guy coming on to you, and we want you to come out and say that he was sexually harassing you. We want to do a Me Too story with you. And I'm like, I didn't feel sexually harassed. I said I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
It's being hit on. Like you don't think that happens to people every single day, to men as well? And no, I don't feel sexually harassed. And I absolutely, and we did these calls for ages because they kept trying to convince me to do what essentially was a fake Me Too story. And I was like, no, I did not feel sexually harassed. And even more so, please don't write about me as I'm some mad victim, because I am actually proud of the fact that I have the strength to walk away from these situations, that I can say, no, I'm not interested. But no, of course, they write me as this crazy victim that I think the title of their article was, Lauren Southern's hate was strong, but the misogyny she was surrounded by was stronger. And I'm like, you guys, you claim to be feminists. And this is why I hate mainstream feminists and male feminists so much, is because what it actually is you can't see women as anything other than victims. You can't write about women as anything other than victims. You're not capable of it, because that blows up your worldview. So I'm sitting here saying, actually, I am a strong woman. I am a tough woman. And you're like, no, you're a victim. And we will make sure you are a victim. And if you won't tell us you're a victim, we will say you're a victim for you.
Let's talk about the weak side of Lauren Southern, because when you're pregnant, you're going to have hormones going through you. How bad did it get? Were you like one of those people who was like crying at the drop of a hat?
Oh, absolutely. I was an absolute psychopath. I feel really bad for what my husband had to deal with. But I remember I went to Outback Steakhouse. Have you ever been to Outback Steakhouse?
Please tell me you went to Outback Steakhouse in Australia. Please.
I did.
Oh my God, I love it. That's like going to Taco Bell in Mexico.
Well, you know what's horrible about it in Australia is I was so excited. I was like, Outback Steakhouse, I love this place. And there's none of the Australian theme in Australia. It's just a normal restaurant here.
Okay. It's just a steakhouse.
It's just a steakhouse. And I walk in and I'm like, where's all like the Crocodile Dundee stuff? And why aren't they doing the accents? Oh, wait, they are doing the accents. That's just their normal voice. But I love Outback Steakhouse. Don't hate me. I know it's like, that's not a real steakhouse, Lauren. It's like fast food. No, it's amazing. I love it. So I was so excited because when you're pregnant, obviously you're so hungry all the time. You just want, when you get that craving, you have to find it, whether it's 2 a.m, doesn't matter. I wanted Outback. So we go there and we sit down and I'm waiting on the steak, the filet mignon with the garlic butter on top. I get it. I take a bite and it tastes like wet rag.
Oh.
Like meat just tasted horrible the entire time I was pregnant. And I am a carnivore. So I just could not eat meat the entire time I was pregnant. It made me feel like I was going to go puke. And I felt like I was going to go puke. So I went to the washroom and I just started bawling my eyes out. And I realized I wasn't bawling my eyes out because I felt sick. I was bawling my eyes out because I wasn't going to be able to eat steak anymore. And I love steak so much. And I was literally sobbing like my mother had just died. And I was like, I hope someone doesn't walk into this washroom because they're going to come up to me and be like, you poor thing. And I'll be like, steak just doesn't taste good anymore.
The fillet doesn't taste good to me. Wow. Oh my God.
Oh, and that's like, yeah, there were many incidents like that.
Did you have to deal with postpartum when you had your kid?
A little bit. I don't think it was like full blown the same as women who would have been diagnosed with it, but definitely my hormones were completely out of whack. I was pretty upset, pretty emotional about everything. And this was a very weird, vulnerable phase for me because I have never been a very emotional person. And definitely having a baby has completely shifted that and changed that a bit to, I've just become way more caring, sensitive, all of these different things. But yeah, I think it may have even just been that, the hormone shift itself being really crazy to deal with. Yeah, because before, I mean, you've seen videos of me at protests. I don't know, I could just walk up to people and send them into a fit of rage and have a laugh about it. I don't know if I could do that now. My hormones have just completely shifted, and it's a post-pregnancy thing. Even my hair got darker. I weirdly enough got way skinnier after pregnancy. It was all over the shop.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. The sponsor that is nearest and dearest to me is Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your entire order. What is Sheath? They're like a boxer brief that you've never had before. They're the most comfortable boxer briefs you will ever wear because they're made out of a moisture wicking technology. But what makes Sheath unique is their dual pouch technology to keep your man parts separated. It's great for working out, great for hot environments. First time I tried it, I'm like, what is this? It's weird. And not in a good way. I was surprised. Now I wear them every single day. And I got to tell you, there's something a little subversive about having an interview and knowing your underwear is holding you there. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your entire order. They've got a line of camouflage ones so you can make your genitals look even more invisible. I'm speaking to you specifically. You know who you are. Let's get back to the show. One of the things that happened, and we're going to talk about this as gently as possible, is when you came back to the internet, things got pretty heated with you and other people on Twitter. How did you handle that?
Well, you have to understand the lore behind it before we get to that. So it actually got heated right when I left. If you remember, there was a big article that came out about me and my producers and I had left at this point. I was like, I'm not going to comment. My perspective was, there's no proof for any of these claims. I've already left the internet. Yeah. No one with, these are supposed to be the red-pilled people, the people who I want to hear facts. I don't believe false accusations. So I'm like, my audience, tons of people, they're not going to read this. There's no evidence to it. It made an array of claims. One saying my producers and I were secretly working for the left-wing lobbyist group Hope Not Hate, which took away my income. That would be an interesting partnership. The other was saying that they had defrauded and stolen money from Tommy Robinson. Then it went on to, I was a secret leftist who loved AOC. I married a Nigerian man. Oh, and I slept with men to write all of my content for me. It was really just, and none of this had any evidence to it, any proof. I think it had in there that my producers had doxed Gavin McInnes. And people, I wasn't expecting it because I didn't think people would believe something written this absurd without any proof, but they did. And full-fledged, like hundreds of thousands of people were like, yep, that's Lauren. Oh, wow. She was making, apparently I was making documentaries on the murder of white South Africans and corruption of NGOs for the far left group Hope Not Hate this entire time. A very logical conclusion. But people, there are videos on YouTube today repeating these claims that have hundreds of thousands of views, and I still get it every day. This is true. This is true. I wrote a response article, but we can go through each of those claims if you'd like here, just really quickly. So the individual who wrote this article, what people have to understand is in the background within the kind of YouTube political sphere, mover and shakers, there is kind of a group of people, and I see it as a giant Mexican standoff on thin ice. They all have blackmail on each other. They all kind of pretend to be friends publicly because they have to. It's like, you promote my book, I promote your book, I've got blackmail on you, and we're all going to stand here in a giant Mexican standoff. I never wanted to be any part of that, ever. So I kind of was like, no, people would send me books of theirs. They'd be like, promote it, do a tour with me, cancel your tour, do this, do that. And I just say, nope. And I kind of cut myself off from that world entirely, which is a bad idea because that kind of turns them all against you. Yeah.
Then they point their guns at you instead of each other.
Then they point your guns at you. But I was like, screw this, walk away, bam, bam, bam. I managed to survive. I'm happy for it. But when this article was initially written, there were, I'd say, 4 reasons why it was written. One was my producers, Kaylin and George. They denied putting Milo Yiannopoulos, who wrote the article, in a movie called You Can't Watch This that they did for Alex Jones. He wanted to be in it. He was absolutely pissed off that they didn't put him in it. 2, Milo had asked me to cancel my Australia tour because he wanted to go on tour there. He said, either you can go on tour with me or you can cancel your tour so you don't take ticket sales from me. I said no, like I've already promised all these people and sold tickets, wanted me to review his book, all these different things. I just had no interest in it. So there was a buildup of like, you are on the outs right now. You have not done what I've said. You guys, basically, your insolence, I'm not going to take anymore. So Milo actually called dozens and dozens of people and told them, and he did this to me first too, because he was actually more mad at my producers. He told them, you are going to make up stories about these people, Kaylin, George, and Lauren. Eventually I was dragged into it as well, or I'm going to fire the blackmail gun at you, because he is blackmailing all these people. In fact, I got an email 6 days ago from someone saying, I just wanted to let you know this happened to me as well. I got so many apologies afterwards saying I had to say this happened. I had to lie about it. I had to pretend that you guys stole from me. Otherwise, he was going to ruin my marriage. He was going to ruin my life. He was going to do X, Y, Z to me. So he went and called a bunch of people, blackmailed them. I got the initial call saying, listen, you have to throw your producers, Kaylin and George, under the bus and say they stole from you, or else I've got all this petty gossip about you that I'll publish in this article. And I said, okay, do it. Go ahead. And the main thing you'll notice in this article is almost every single claim is actually an exact projection of things Milo has done. So he accused me of having a ghostwriter who I slept with for content. And the person it was Alan Bokhari that he said it was. He has come out publicly and been like, no, this didn't happen. Of course, that's ridiculous. I didn't do that for Lauren. He's the guy who wrote Milo's book, Dangerous. So that was, that's one thing that's just an absolute projection. Then two, tons of money was stolen, verifiable scams. Where did the $100,000 go for the white privilege grant? Gone, stolen. His podcast, where he never completed it and took all of his money from his subscribers. All of the events he's planned where he sold tickets and didn't show up. He even did that with the Australia tour again, like this, all of these verifiable scams. I have no verifiable scams to my name, but this was all invented in the article. Secretly working for a far left organization. He's an FBI informant right now. So all of these things were like hardcore projection. There was no proof for any of this. And it's going to blow people's minds. But so the main claim that people really believed about my producers, and I think people hate them a lot more than they hate me in this article, because they are accused of having stolen money from Tommy Robinson, doxed him, and trying to get his family destroyed and all of this. None of these things happened. In fact, when this article was published, they were still working together. Milo, Tommy, Kaylin, and George. Or sorry, not Milo, Kaylin, Tommy, and George. They were all still working together, making videos in the background. And Tommy basically said, listen, like Tommy and a bunch of other people that worked with them, I have to throw you under the bus or Milo's going to ruin my life. And that's what happened. And Tommy said, okay, but I still want to hire you. You guys are some of the best employees I've had. So I'm going to tarnish your names publicly and pretend you stole from me, but I still want you to work for me. So they worked together for months and months and months afterwards. And Tommy was just paying them. I'd get messages from people. They're like, oh, we're filming with Tommy today. And no one knew who their producers were. Right. And I published the screenshots of all of this in my article. But people wonder why now Kaylin and George have switched to the far left and they've just said F it and they're now working for far left companies. It's because they produced documentaries for years for the right wing. They were some of the best producers ever. Farmlands, Borderless, You Can't Watch This. Like, they made phenomenal content. You'll notice Tommy Robinson has almost fallen off the face of the earth since he stopped working with them, because they did all of his web work. They did all of his video work. They managed a lot of his interviews and all of that. And then that whole movement believes complete lies about them, complete fabrication about them. And not only that, but the very people they were working for were willing to throw them under the bus and lie about them to save face, and then still ask them to work for them behind the scenes. So they were like, screw this. I don't condone what they did. I got absolutely screwed over by a ton of people and absolutely lied about by a ton of people, but I still hold to my conservative principles. I'm not going to, but you can't really blame people for having that reaction, I don't think.
One of the things that I saw when this was going down was your former boss, Ezra Levant, head of The Rebel. He came out very heavily against them. He said that he'd been being blackmailed by them. And then there was some audio of him basically giving them blackmail money. Like, what was going on there? Do you have an insight into that?
They were not blackmailing Ezra Levant. This was all like smoke and mirrors stuff once again. And Tommy once again was told you have to like side with your boss. Essentially, you have to side with your boss and say, yes, they're bad people. And he kind of acquiesced to that every single time. I can't talk too much about that, unfortunately, because of legal stuff. I can't approach that.
Let's talk about something you can talk about that you do have insight about, which is you're a lifelong Canadian. And the stuff with the quarantines and the lockdowns is, of all places, and I'm embarrassed for my country, reaching ahead in Canada especially. We're seeing both people standing up to the police in trying to, just live a normal life. And we're seeing police really get authoritarian. And I've seen several videos on Twitter of police like breaking down doors and pulling people from their homes. Are you surprised that both there's this level of defiance among Canadians and this level of authoritarianism on behalf of the Canadian police?
Yeah, I think we're mostly seeing that in Eastern Canada, which is kind of known a bit more for its activism and stronger police force than Western Canada, which I grew up in. But from what I've heard, because I haven't been there that often, I've been in Australia for most of the lockdown, but from what I've heard, Canadians are very laissez-faire with their laws, like drug laws. They were almost, even when marijuana wasn't illegal, because we're a more docile population, I feel like the police haven't cracked down so much on making sure you're absolutely following everything to a T. So marijuana was all around the place, even before it was illegal. It might as well have been legal legal. Driving, if you go over the speed limit, you're probably not going to get that in that much trouble in Canada versus Australia. I'd be going 5 over here and my husband or friends are like, you're going to get a ticket. You're going to get pulled over. You're going to get fined. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Because in Canada, it's not that big of a deal. Lockdown laws, people have just really, from what I've heard, they're just kind of, maybe we'll follow it. Maybe we won't. And I feel like it's because Canada is just less likely to go have like massive armed protests, this kind of stuff like other countries. So it's all a little more relaxed. Canadians are always a bit more middle of the road. We don't know, maybe. And it is shocking to see the response from the police. And it's shocking to see actual Canadians standing up, almost American style, where it's like, no, we're not going to take this. And I think that's when you have Canadians doing this, it speaks to the level of how overdone this lockdown has been and how fed up people are. It would be one thing if they told us, we've got a plan. We're going to lock down from this time to this time. Then this vaccine is going to come out. Then we're going to be done lockdown. Or these are the procedures. This is the law and this isn't. But there's no plan. Yeah. We're on lockdown number 3. The rules change every other day. What is it today? I think I was supposed to be in quarantine until a few days ago. And I got a text like a week or so or before that saying I'm no longer in quarantine. I can't make any life plans. Borders are closing all over the place. Certain cities, certain areas you can't drive into. And no matter what we do, new cases still appear.
It's a virus, right?
They're still happening everywhere. We've got the UK strain here in Australia. And I'm like, you locked down the whole country and it made its way here. It's almost like humans are going to move around and viruses are going to spread. And it seems like, the answer to failed lockdowns is more lockdowns.
Yeah, but I tell you, I'm a little surprised that the Canadians had their fill of it before the Americans did, because there's a lot of talk about Americans being, we've had it and we're, come from my cold dead hands, Charlton Heston with the guns, and my countrymen have been very, very compliant with this stuff. So to see that from north of the border, where everyone is much more, like you said, docile, was surprising, but also a bit kind of reassuring that there's still people out there who are at a certain point where we'll be like, this is ridiculous, and I'm not going to lose my entire livelihood for something that has no evidence of being efficacious in terms of achieving the result that you're claiming.
Absolutely. And I think that there are a lot of people who are sitting there like, I don't know how long the rest of my life is going to be. I don't know how long this lockdown stuff is going to happen, but eventually I'm going to have to keep living. Eventually I'm going to have to keep having an existence. Whether I think it came out the other day that there have been a few thousand Australians just take off to go on vacations. No idea if they're going to come home or be able to get a flight back, but they're probably thinking to themselves, I've wanted to travel the world. I don't know if I'll ever get that chance again. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I've got one life to live and I don't want to spend the rest of my life in lockdown in this little cubicle apartment ordering Amazon Prime boxes and chicken nuggies to my house for the rest of my life. We are so detached, and even more so now, from what actually makes us human. I mean, you have people protesting against hunting while eating chicken nuggets. They don't even know how they get their food. They've never hunted and killed their own food before. People barely go outside anymore. They don't know how the things they buy are created because they're made in factories in China, and they just get shipped to them and arrive at their door. We are so disconnected from all of this. And now this bit of humanity we had where we could go out in public spaces, go to concerts, go to events, that's been taken from us too. And we're literally just these digital versions of ourselves being repeatedly gaslit by algorithms online into compliance. And it's really, really scary. And I sometimes have I always think of random conspiracies, what could be actually happening behind the scenes. And I almost wonder if people know you can't have some mad revolution where you execute people, because we're all very averse to death and blood. And
Sure.
If you actually had guillotines in the streets, I think even hardcore leftists would be like, we've learned in the history books, this is really, really wrong. So we've made the new public square the internet.
Yeah.
We've made it the only place you can have your conversation. You'll literally get curb stomped by a cop if you leave your house. And this is where our life and social gatherings and everything goes. And you can just digitally execute people now. We've made that normal.
I had
cut
this
their head off digitally.
If in America they started putting up guillotines, corporate journalists would be laughing how dull the blades are. I think these people we're going in a very dangerous direction, and I think the media is either complicit or oblivious to how far they're pushing a lot of people who are feeling marginalized, have nothing to lose. Are you as concerned as I am about where this is headed?
Oh, absolutely. This is just an age-old saying. Well, actually, let's start. First of all, the human norm is not peace.
Yeah.
The human norm is violence, chaos, barbarism, scalping people and taking their hearts out and throwing them downstairs like the Mayans. It's the human norm is violence. And to think that we are somehow different in this age, which I think a lot of people do. They always say, that won't happen to us. We're different. We're peaceful. We'll never get an authoritarian government. Naive. This has happened all throughout history. And the normal pattern is, if you make peaceful revolution impossible, if you make peaceful conversation and political disagreement impossible, you will make violence inevitable. And that is a rule. I didn't make the rules. Sorry, don't get mad at me. But that's what you're going to see. And this has already come to fruition. I'm surprised, honestly, that Republicans didn't start rioting earlier.
Yeah.
Because they've been taught for a year rioting is the new form of politics. It's how you get rewarded socially by the media. It's how you get rewarded by politicians. It's how you get policy changes. Hawk Newsome told me for my new documentary, Crossfire, he's like, we've done years of peaceful protest and we've gotten more change done in 1 year of violent riots and burning cities down than we ever had before. Or you're going to get a Pavlovian response. People are going to be like, well, that's how I get the treat.
Yeah.
Time to burn this shit to the ground.
Yeah, I'm very, very, and the obliviousness of it's kind of getting into this Marie Antoinette level where they're just like laughing at all these, these stupid Trump supporters, and you lost, and go home and learn to cope. And it's like, you don't, in other contexts, the leftist critique of when you have a marginalized population and you spit on people and they have no status and they have no opportunity, no hope for a livelihood. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? Like, leftists understand this when we're talking about other marginalized populations, but when it's like 70 million, which is a big percentage of the population, it's like, oh, everything's going to be fine, get over it. And I'm like, you do not understand you should be the ones to understand this, and you don't seem to be able to. Let's talk about the lockdowns in Australia, because there's something I saw on Twitter that I almost couldn't wrap my head around. There was a woman who was tweeting at the Australian police because she was having an argument with her boyfriend about whether it was still okay to walk the dog. And the cops told him, no, like, basically your dog has to shit in your house. And she's like, oh, okay, thank you, officer. Was it really that bad? Like, you couldn't even walk dogs?
I think that was a suggestion, but you are seeing videos come out of Melbourne and a few other places where people are getting dragged out of cars and literally beat up for refusing to wear a mask. There was one guy who wasn't wearing a mask in a store, and he was grabbed and thrown to the ground and dragged out, not even by a police officer, but just by I think it was like the rent a security guard guy. And this is what I find the scariest from all of this, actually. Like, governments, they do tyrannical stuff. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
It's the daubing on other people that bothers me the most. The big video that came out of Canada with the whole family being dragged out in the snow with no shoes on, the old man being dragged out. That was because a neighbor daubed on them for having a family dinner of like 6 people or something. What is wrong with that neighbor? Like, what possessed you to do that? You see the wife and the husband situation with the dog. He probably wanted to take the dog for a walk because he wanted to get away from your crazy ass lady that will report him to the police for taking the dog for a walk. Daubing on your own family members. We're seeing this with the Capitol Hill riots as well. Oh, yeah. I'm not saying there weren't people that didn't do criminal things there, and this is what the West has so wrong. Your family, your blood, they are all you have at the end of the day. When the apocalypse happens, when everything goes to crap, it's going to be your family that you're going to be surrounded by and are going to be the last ones on earth there to help you, that little tribe. You may think it's the government, but they're not always going to be there for you. They'll abandon you in a heartbeat. They don't know who you are. They don't care. You may think it's, you're wider. Maybe it's the school you go to. No, when crap hits the fan, it's going to be you and your immediate family, maybe your extended family. This is why in the Middle East, families live on an entire street all together. The mom, dad, their kids live in the house up above. They just keep building the house higher. So the whole family lives together because they get it is life or death. The government isn't going to help me. If crap goes down, it's going to be my family and we're going to stick together. And now you have people daubing in their aunt and uncle, not even for doing anything, just for walking around the Capitol, calling the police, saying you need to go to jail. Done. This civilization is done once you've reached that level, because the government are not a family. The government are not a base for community. It's a facade. It's a facade. And we've seen this in history before. It's like Soviet level. You daub on your neighbors for points, and the points right now are ego and social points. Maybe I'll get in an article on BuzzFeed. I'll get lots of retweets and likes if I say I sent my mom into the FBI when she was at the rally. And portray
myself as the victim.
And portray myself as the victim. That is our currency, popularity and victimhood. Yeah. And people want it as badly as possible. And that's also how you protect yourself in a career sense. If you can make yourself a victim, you won't get fired from your job. There's the joke. If you think you're about to get fired, come out as gay, because they can't fire you. If it's our new currency. It's the new thing we value. We have left from physical persecution to this social persecution, which I would almost argue in some senses can be worse.
Oh yeah, it's more pernicious, yeah.
I'd rather be punched in the face than have an article say that I'm a pedophile. Yeah, and yet, for some reason, you'll get dragged to jail for punching someone. Well, not for some reason, obviously. You'll be dragged to jail for punching someone in the face, but nothing will happen to you if you publish these articles. This is one belief I've also realized. People always say, why don't you just sue them? Why don't you just, defamation is illegal. Slander is illegal. No. It's only illegal to defame the rich.
Yeah.
It's the only people, because they're the only ones that can afford to actually pursue it. And how awful is that, to make a law that only can be enforced by the wealthy?
Yeah, well, you're talking to an anarchist here, so yeah. Lauren, so you're singing my song. We are running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Oh, man. Talking about Outback Steakhouse.
You are welcome.